Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Thursday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Is this Thursday already?
It is Thursday, yes.
Weeks go by pretty fast.
Blazing through.
But the weekend's coming. Isn't that the way the weeks go like this?
Yeah, it does.
And maybe you'll get out in the garden and make sure your tomatoes are working and growing and all that kind of stuff.
Tell you what, the mosquitoes are out so much.
I walked today, one mosquito.
Only one?
And I didn't have spray.
Wow.
So
they don't like you.
We're making progress. Thank goodness for those sprays.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's no pollution in those sprays.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would like to talk about something that I think is very, very important. And it comes from looking at Lou's site today. Yeah. And Fred Reed had an article up there who had put it up on Own's Review at first. And we're actually using it in our title because it's really catchy.
It is, yeah.
His title was "America Makes Aircraft Carriers, China Makes Money." Yeah. And I mentioned to you earlier, Ann Rand would be proud of that because she just thought that that was the greatest theme ever, that the United States said, we make money. But and she might even be agreeable with all those aircraft carriers for all I know. But the whole thing is, this caught my attention because you start reading about the success of China, and it is pretty darn impressive.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they're our arch enemy. They're the enemy of the United States, and we have to do something. They're always doing something to us. And so they can't be our friends, and they can't be making progress if they're a bunch of commies.
Yeah.
But it turns out that when you look into that, they know something about capital, the capital movement. You have to have savings. For instance, we've lost our perspective on capital, where it comes from. It doesn't come from a printing press. It comes from production. It comes from making some profits. It comes from saving, and then it comes from investments, and then you have that. And we don't do any of that. We just print it, and we have special privileges because we still have a military might, and we still are a powerhouse, and we still have a lot of wealth, but things are shrinking. And the efforts of capitalism actually growing elsewhere. And China is an example of it. So you don't dare say it, but China may be more capitalistic than the United States. Now, that's probably unpatriotic, but if it's true, it should be said, because there's something going on here, because I see things turning down here, and the only thing we can do because of these circumstances I described is that we still have this privilege of printing money.
Yeah.
The Chinese have worked hard, and the answer to that is no, they're slaves.
Yeah.
They're all slaves. But for some reason, I think a lot of Chinese peasants and people who were very, very poor before they became industrialized in the last 30, 40 years, that they probably went to the cities and took those jobs voluntarily.
Yeah.
I don't think they qualify as slave labor. And the slave labor is a different story on what really happens. But anyway, China is excelling, and we're still spending money. And there's quite a few things that we'll go over where the difference. Just the military spending, that's the whole point of the title, aircraft carriers. And I've complained about aircraft carriers for years and years. I said, in a way, isn't an aircraft carrier pretty old-fashioned? Oh, no, but we have a nuclear aircraft carrier. But China right now is building nuclear reactors for peaceful purposes and keeping their lights on.
Yeah.
So, no, they continue to make progress, and we continue to spend money. And I think we are in a situation where things are shifting. How big the reset is. For some reason, I listen to that term and I know what they're talking about, but it doesn't excite me as much as the ups and downs and the reflection. It's not that this is a big deal. A lot of people knew that things would come to a conclusion the way they are evolving right now when they were arguing to start the Federal Reserve System. And as Keynesianism ushered its way in, then we end up with this mess. So this, to me, is a fascinating article because it asks the question, well, if I'm complaining about this, what kind of system do they have? And what kind of system do we have? And I think that's the kind of thing that our people here in this country ought to be thinking more about, rather than blame China or blame Russia. Yes, they have problems, but we have problems, and we have a greater moral responsibility to what we're doing here in this country, rather than saying, well, we'll strong arm the Chinese and we'll put on sanctions and we'll start a trade war. There's a lot of things there, and it wasn't all done by Biden. Biden hasn't helped, but this is a very bipartisan situation, the mess that we're in with China and with others.
Yeah, I think Fred Reed did a great job, because he captured a lot of things that I've been thinking and put them down in better words than I would write. But he makes this important contrast, because the U.S. relies on strong-arm tactics to try to get our way. We rely on force, where the Chinese come in and they rely on innovation, they rely on making deals overseas, and the more the U.S. tries to isolate them, the more they go ahead and get involved with innovation at home. We're basically driving our own downfall by pushing China from being a competitor to an enemy. Fred writes about a few of these examples, and I'll just give a couple here. But on the 5G, if you remember, the U.S. was not capable at the time of building a better 5G network, and still has not. So what do? We don't try to compete and get better. We just tell Europe, you can't buy Huawei. That's it. You can't buy it. And Americans, you can't buy it. So basically forcing the Europeans to not buy a better product. And the same is true with Russia. The U.S. can't compete in natural gas price with Russia. So we say, Europeans, you can't have Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So this over and over and over again, and we have basically, this is what Fred said, we have an over-bureaucratized military empire. Well, China is a commercial entity. It's agile, it's cutthroat, it's innovative. So compare those two, and one to me looks like a dead-end street, building aircraft carriers, and the other one looks like it's developing technologies.
The point that I'd like to make is, there's been a couple articles today that make this issue, and the point of some of the things that we do are pretty stupid. And the first one I picked here was it's malinvestment, but it's stupid policy too. And that is this one, and we've talked about this for weeks, and if not years, on why are we in Afghanistan? We shouldn't have gone out. All of that. But this article just came out because, the transition wasn't good for our policy in Afghanistan, and it hasn't been good for a long, long time. And we've had a war going on there for 20 years. And I asked you earlier, and you didn't have any snap answers for me. And I said, where is China doing something similar to what we did in Afghanistan? Where have they been fighting a war for 5 or 10, 15, 20 years, just consuming wealth? And you didn't, maybe you came across one or two.
I couldn't find it. I was looking and looking.
But here it is. We're there for 20 years. Then we wonder why we have problems, and all this money's going into the military, and the standard of living is going down in this country. And what do you mean? There's unemployment. Nobody will take a job, so people must be fully employed. No, they're fully satisfied by free money, flowing into them, which will end soon. So this is something that is been going on for a long, long time. It really started after World War II, when we were really, technologically the powerhouse, the economic powerhouse, the military powerhouse. We were just everything. But there were people after World War II who said, can't keep doing this, and this pseudo gold standard is not going to work, and they knew that would fail. But we continued and was doing it. It's amazing the resilience of a relatively free society that keeps getting less free, how long it can last. But there was one other one too that I wanted to mention as part of this problem, and why we might not why we have to resort to other than competition, because I think we're not competitive with the Chinese. I think that's it. We want stuff, we print money, and we get stuff. They get the money, they save the money, and they invest it. They don't invade other countries. But this was one from Bob Wenzel, and I think this is interesting because it reflects some of the sociology that's going on. And he was lamenting the fact that the recruiting now for the military it has to be sensitive to and comply with the woke army. Yeah. So you can imagine that that will introduce problems. I haven't checked, but and China is authoritarian, but they might be more practical. But I don't think the Chinese are going to worry about this kind of stuff. But I don't think that's how you build an army. Is forcing or believing that we'll have a really, really efficient, dependable army. Of course, foreign policy has a lot to do with that too. Why should you be wanting to be in a war like we've seen, and seen so many people die and get that crippled up for wars that were undeclared and cost a lot of money. So I think we should try to learn a lesson from this, and it would involve a lot of changes, in morality as well as monetary policy and economically, because I think we have slipped significantly. It's just a shame, or maybe important point rather than being ashamed, that we might learn a lesson from China. But the stage is set for looking for trouble if you say anything. Even some of the people that have been the closest with us on COVID, they really detest China. Everything is, it's China's fault, And it
happened here, he'd be out on his ear. But, Reed also talks about the suicidal policies of the U.S. The U.S. is pushing China because it's using strong arm tactics. It's pushing them to become more independent on certain tech issues and to develop their own, and they're actually turning out to be better. So instead of having a customer, we actually have a competitor, which is turning into an enemy. And here are a couple of the examples of this, Dr. Paul. Fred Reed points out a new innovative maglev trains, 385-mile-an-hour trains they're developing. They're using a new technology with liquid nitrogen as the coolant instead of liquid helium. It's 1/50th the price of helium. It's something that's brand new on the market. The other one would be several other things, new cryptography, new smart roads, et cetera, et cetera. But here's something that, here's an example that I'll just read this couple of sentences that Fred Reed wrote. And it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to be doing it this way. He said, regarding the 5G war, Trump could have bought 5G from Huawei, gotten a sweetheart deal, great prices, factories in America, and so on. Instead, he banned Huawei from the U.S. and then twisted the arms of the vassal states of Europe. Thus, neither America or Europe has the service, but China is rolling it out fast. Brilliant, Don.
Such pragmatists.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
That is it. The way I see the problem in a generalization is that our system, because of all the rules and regulations, confusion on social matters and all this, we have become super bureaucratic.
Yeah.
It's the bureaucracy. And it isn't Hitler's fascism, this kind of thing. But it's still an encroachment on liberty because there has to be rules. There has to be, the bureaucrats running things. And if you add up, and we should have a less friendly term as a bureaucrat, but the thousands of people who work, 100,000, more than 100,000, I think it's much higher now, of the people who have to, in our government, carry guns. Here's a society that says the problem in the inner city is there's too many guns. We have to ban the guns from the people.
Yeah.
At the same time, we get more bureaucrats with guns, and they're going to solve these problems. And the guns that we put into the military, and if you include everything as a gun, I would say the record that we have isn't very good. But I think it'd be interesting to even try to label what China is, because if you say, China sounds like they're libertarian, maybe these are the good guys now. But I think I'll start off by saying I think they understand a little bit about capitalism, on how it works, how you have to save and buy and invest, and I think we have been forgetting those rules.
Yeah, the worst thing is the only the only things that we're importing from China are the worst aspects of their regime. We're importing their social credit system, this whole vaccine passport nonsense, the surveillance state. We're importing the worst parts instead of their innovation and their interest in using capital, rather than building a military empire. You talk about the standard of living going down. The only place that's going up is the Beltway, where every average middle class family has $1 million home, and I mean it's incredible. So do we want to move on to how the narrative is falling apart? This is the title of our next segment. Let's put up that first clip. This is something that caught our attention. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine revealed on Wednesday that people who get at least one COVID shot will automatically be entered in a lottery to win $1 million. And 12 to 17-year-olds will have the opportunity to win a scholarship to a 4-year college. So this governor is using the COVID bailout money to put up a lottery to try to entice people to get the vaccine. If it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard, the most shameful thing I've ever heard, I don't know what is. In the meantime, one other picture before we throw it back to you, Dr. Paul, is let's look in the real world. Let's what Ohio looks like. Let's have that next clip if we can. You think it was a disaster. We got to get this vaccine because everyone's dying. Well, actually, the only thing dying, thankfully, good news in Ohio, is the COVID virus. It's disappearing. But here's DeWine. Hey, want some money? Want some money?
And I think this is not just a 1 week deal. I think it's like 4 or 5 weeks they're going to do it. And if it's successful, they'll keep doing it. They have to make sure their friends win the lottery. But that is proof, I think, of the argument that people ought to be allowed to make choices.
Yeah.
This is indirectly they're saying we don't want it, we don't want to do it, bribe us a little bit, and it looks like the beer isn't enough.
Yeah, beer isn't enough.
So now they have to. You see, we're basically gamblers in this country. We might win $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's worth a shot. Most of the people have survived the shot.
Yeah.
But too many are getting sick, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they should get together. You get free liquor and a chance to win the lottery. Maybe that will entice more people. But anyway, let's move on now, because we've been talking about the New York Times. They had an interesting article out yesterday that we talked about. But here's something that caught my attention this morning. We talked about it before the show. This is really the narrative unraveling, because if it was anything other than the New York Times, they'd be kicked off social media. They'd have a Facebook warning put over the thing, and they would be banned. But let's put up this next clip. New York Times today. The article is, after the pandemic, will more people wear masks for colds and flu? But buried in this is a fascinating statement. He says, wearing a mask when showing cold or flu symptoms is common in several countries, mainly in East Asia. But listen to this, Dr. Paul. But there's no tidy scientific consensus on how much it limits the spread of respiratory illnesses. In plain English, the New York Times is saying, kind of looks like masks don't work, which is what we've been saying for a year or so.
Boy, if that gets out,
it's all over.
Who's going to be punished? Who's going to be punished? The gullible, because they will have been so conditioned and they feel naked if they don't have a mask on, and it's going to last for a long time. And they're gearing up for this, because now it's they were looking for a new virus, and they still might get their wish. They can create them, but now they're talking about for colds, for colds and influenza. They keep saying that, when they talk about there was no influenza cases, and there's various reasons, but one thing they haven't mentioned that I sort of wonder about, and that is that the cases were misdiagnosed.
Yeah. That
some of the flu cases, since those tests were unreliable, and you could bump it up or bump it down depending on what they need for the statistic.
Exactly.
And I think they're capable of, passing out the wrong information. So the other one along this line, I think, did you have an?
No, I think this next one is too. This is the narrative falling apart.
Yeah. Okay. This is. We
can put it up actually in the next clip.
This is on Dr. Gupta.
Yeah.
Gupta.
You don't get more mainstream than that.
Yeah, he's a CNN person.
Yeah.
And he's been around for a long time. I think he's a neurosurgeon, and probably a good neurosurgeon, but he's not good at government medicine.
Yeah.
And he said something that shows his frustration going on there, and has made a suggestion, but and he almost leaned on this idea that maybe the medicine and the government should be careful.
Yeah,
of course, that's what I'm telling you.
What you've been saying all along.
It should be separated.
Let's put that clip up if we can. There we go. Sorry, Dr. Paul. Go ahead, just so the readers can see it.
He's come to the conclusion that most likely the CDC is not following science. Yeah. Well, how's that the case? And I think the way I understand what you're saying was, well, there was some, and I believe he got some help from and incentives from Senator Collins.
Yeah.
Who I think is a very honest person. She tends to be a progressive at times, but he must have read her, and the suggestion was that the good information, CDC was following bad information,
yeah.
And now the information's on, that stuff is wrong.
Yeah.
And every day they're finding that what they have done was wrong, and we just mentioned a case where they're suggesting that we do the wrong things. And he said now and now they've loosened their reputation and their credibility, and now they're coming up with suggestions that might be right. And if you have good science, but people don't follow the good science that is available to them now, and that's why it looks like to me that he's complaining about the CDC is the CDC will not do it, and the people aren't willing to accept it because they've lost all credibility, and that's expected. Why should they have the credibility? They don't deserve it. Yeah. And this is why things should be not so massively decided. Medicine is the complete opposite of massive treatment of medicine and things that we go through is the thing that I've mentioned so much, even though this doesn't solve every problem, but it's the doctor-patient relationship that makes a difference. And now they're saying, well, people aren't following because they don't believe us anymore.
Well, the thing about this, which I think is amazing, okay, we know he bought into the whole COVID thing, he bought into the lockdowns, he bought into everything, and now he's really made a turn. But it wasn't long ago, and it may still be in fact in place, but we explicitly, the rules of social media, and I won't mention them, but every social media said you cannot cross the CDC. You cannot criticize them, you cannot say they're wrong. If you do, we are going to pull your account, we're going to pull you off of our social media. And so I wonder now that people like Gupta are speaking out, are they going to cancel CNN? Is YouTube going to cancel CNN? And that's why it's so amazing. Let's put that clip up again really quick, because here's what Gupta said. Science is not necessarily being followed by the CDC. Now that is heresy. You're not allowed to say that. And let's look at the next one. This is the quote that you referenced, and I put a little bit of yellow on it, which I think is important. Here's Dr. Gupta, mainstream CNN. I think for a long time the concern was that the CDC was providing guidance at the beginning of the pandemic that was not scientifically based. And then skip down to the science is not necessarily being followed. And now here's what he's saying at the end. So in the end, the CDC needs to be just a science-based organization. What does the science say? You don't need to wear a mask outside. It's just one of the things that, again, we've known this for some time. So I think implied in what he's saying here, Dr. Paul, when he says that CDC is not being just a science-based organization, he's using the P word, politics.
I wonder how he's doing at CNN right now.
I hope he's not in, yeah.
It seems strange after all these years of being a propaganda machine, and somebody breaks loyalty with this. I don't know whether that'll go unnoticed or not. So,
I think he knows which way the wind blows, and he just like Gottlieb, he's a survivor. But I wanted to throw this other one up because we've talked about the CDC director who seems to have an amazing ability to say the absolute craziest things. Remember, she said, I have a sense of impending doom, and she was tears pouring out of her face as COVID went like this. Well, here is Shep Smith again. He had her on the show, and we talked about Shep yesterday, I think. He had her on the show. Let's put this up. CNBC Shepard Smith asks the CDC director, why do we have to wear masks if we're vaccinated? And here's what she said. So we have to look at the science with regard to how the vaccine has worked in the real world setting, ... which means absolutely nothing. And this, I see, Dr. Paul, to me it looks like the narrative is slipping. she can't explain anything that she's doing, and the credibility, I think, is shot, and that's
Well,
good news for everyone.
I'll make a suggestion for her. The next time she's out there, she should use her experts. She should ask the president to come out and back her up and to explain to the people what she just got done saying.
Take off one of his 12 masks.
You want to go ahead and are you?
I'm going to finish with a couple of quick ones, Dr.
Okay.
Paul, that I saw that I had saved that I wanted to mention. If we can just do these really quick.
All right.
This is about COVID. This next clip is Dr. Makary. He is very, very well known. U.S. cases are dropping like a rock. They're down 42% in 11 days. And that's weekday numbers, not weekend reporting bias. He said, yes, yet government doctors continue their negativity, issuing stern warnings, pushing bad policy, and dangling variant fears. That's interesting. There's 0 of the hundreds of variants to date worldwide have evaded the vaccine's ability to prevent death. So this whole scaremongering about the variants has not come to pass. Let's look at the next one. It was a tweet storm that he had, but another good one. Here's Dr. Makary. San Francisco had 14 COVID cases yesterday, including those who are asymptomatic. And this is great advice. We need to address the public's distorted risk perception in many parts of the country, I'd say the blue states, and abandon the goal of absolute risk elimination at all costs. I think that last part, Dr. Paul, really encapsulates the mental illness that is raging across the country.
Boy, that's for sure. And I'm going to go ahead and close by once again thanking our viewers for tuning in today. And as I just look back to our last 15 or 20 minutes, I feel like most of what we talked about was embedded in between the lines. There was a bit of optimism there that yes, this whole mess is running its course and people are changing their mind, but we still have a long way to go because there's too much special interest, political and financial interest that are very, very powerful, and they're not going to let it go away. The pharmaceutical industry is pretty strong, we know. But also, we talked a little bit about foreign policy, which was a little bit different, and China. And this, to me, is an important issue because I think there's a lot of misconception. But where I see there's a little bit of hope and improvement on things getting less worse on the coronavirus, foreign policy remains a dangerous situation. And I just am never happy when we're on the side of provoking, sending planes on borders and firing missiles and seeing how close we can get to people with ships, and then doing some rhetoric that is just aggravating things rather than trying to soften the disagreements that we have. And I think that's where the danger is, and it's been there, and it hasn't gone away. We haven't improved our foreign policy at all. We shift parties, and the rhetoric will change a little bit. But I'll tell you what, that military-industrial complex is very, very powerful. And when you combine it with the power of the pharmaceutical industry and the authoritarianism that exists on locking down, I mean, we have quite a bit of danger. And I think people should not, ignore the fact that the foreign policy is one very big issue. But once again, if you disapprove of a foreign policy and us building, the aircraft carriers we don't need and doing all this spending, and it doesn't help national defense, it hurts us because it helps us to go bankrupt. We have to realize that whether you spend the money on the aircraft carrier or spend the money in ruining the economy by, this lockdown that we have suffered through, it's really all the same. As an attack on the American people, I think the American people have a lot more to worry about, from our own government abusing their powers than we have to worry about an invasion. It's the invasion of our own government into our houses. Now they want to invade our bodies and put in a passport with a vaccine, and they haven't given up on that, but the resistance to that is growing. So yes, there's a battle going on, and it's a similar battle that's been going on here really since our revolution, and that is the pro-liberty people against the pro-bureaucrats and pro-big government people. And that'll occupy us for a while, but it's very important. Our country has experienced periods of time where we far excelled everybody else because we were the freest. Right now, we are not the freest, and we are not the wealthiest, and we do not have the highest moral standards either. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong, because the country was built on some basically good moral issues, and at one time thought more highly of sound money and free markets. But we have to revive the spirit of liberty in order to get enough people to move the country in that direction. And that's not a simple political viewpoint. That is a philosophic viewpoint, to get people to understand the difference between a free society and an authoritarian society. And I think it's very important that we reach out to young people, because they'll make the difference on what they're exposed to, and whether or not they can be competitive enough to go to a university and pick and choose on some of the things that they hear at their university. That, to me, makes it a philosophic argument and key to whether or not we live in a free country or not. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.